Is this the point where someone has lost their freedom? Or did it actually begin long before, all the way back at this age, or this age, or this age?
Hello.
Meet 20-year-old Jeremy Duran, a high school dropout who's awaiting trial in the Pinal County Jail on serious felony charges, including armed robbery and assault with a deadly weapon. A violent story that hit the local news. But there was a lot that transpired leading up to this point.
So when was the first time that you ended up in the system, like as a juvenile? How old were you?
Oh, I was young. I was like 9 years old, just like criminal trespass. Then it went to like fighting assaults, and then burglaries and thefts and shit. And it just kept getting worse and worse.
Jeremy grew up with his grandparents, Billy and Rosa Duran, who did their best to raise 9 of their grandchildren.
I was raised with my Mexican side of my family in Casa Grande. I mean, my grandparents tried to give me everything that they needed to give me and stuff like that. My grandfather would always tell me, about, hey, mijo, why don't you get your education? Why don't you get your diploma?
But Jeremy turned to the streets instead, telling us he didn't have experiences in school that ever really captured his interest.
I don't think I've had enough experiences to motivate me to. But if I would have met them, like I said, them connections to people that were like showing me how interesting these things were, yeah, I would have shot right into it. I would have took it all in like a sponge, you know.
There are many factors that led to Jeremy's current situation, but could the right school, the right mentor, or the right spark to learn have led to an entirely different outcome? We pose the question because enlightening studies and data show 80% of those incarcerated across the nation are high school dropouts. Sheriff Mark Lamb, known to his national television audience as the American Sheriff from the A&E show 60 Days In, wanted to know how his jail fits into this statistic, so he ran a survey among his current inmates asking the question, do you have a high school diploma?
We can see that 65% of the people in our facility that did not get a GED or a diploma. It does have an effect. It has an effect on your ability to get a job and stay busy and keep yourself out of trouble.
This national report found there's nearly a 70% chance that an African-American man without a high school diploma will be imprisoned by his mid-30s. Inmate Jordan Harris is part of this statistic. At 31 years old, he's another high school dropout who's sitting behind bars in the Pinal County Jail, his latest incarceration.
When I decided to drop out, I say, honestly, when I hit the 11th grade.
He almost made it to graduation, so why quit nearing the finish line?
Honestly, I didn't think I had much of a future.
Jordan tells us that learning general curriculum offered by traditional public schools often left kids like him feeling alienated.
I had a problem with history just because I didn't like that they would just tell you, Africans were just slaves, which is not true.
He says he wasn't shown people beyond MLK who looked like him succeeding through education. So psychologically, he adopted the belief that education is a route for white kids and not minorities. That was enforced through various suspensions and finally getting arrested at school, hauled off campus in handcuffs for not reporting on a minor juvenile charge.
Sounds like to me what you're describing, how your whole path went, is the school to prison pipeline. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
And what do you think of that? Would you say that your experience would fit into that?
In a sense, yeah. In a sense, yeah.
Why?
I kept hearing I was crazy and I was bad, and I fed into it, and that's what I thought of myself. But yeah, I didn't have that one person that showed me what I could make for myself or my family, and I just didn't have that. So what I had was, drug dealers. It's the typical story,
Ask yourself this: would you believe a 15-year-old kid was working for the federal government? But he was.
Here's a notorious incarceration story that's not typical. Rick Wershey, known as White Boy Rick, famously went to prison for 32 years on nonviolent offenses at the age of 17. This after the FBI used him for years as an informant of sorts in the Detroit crime and corruption surge of the 80s. Rick was not only enticed by the streets, but encouraged unbelievably by the federal government to stop going to school. That's right, to drop out.
I was kind of a street kid at an early age and pushed in the wrong direction by our government and by other people that life kind of became my education. So I was getting educated in the street, but not in the classroom.
Although Rick's story is extreme and unique, there's one factor that he has in common with almost all the other kids from the inner city neighborhood where Rick is from.
70 to 80% of the kids where me and Rob grew up don't graduate high school.
We come from a gang-infested and drug-infested neighborhood, so nobody wasn't thinking about getting educated. We were just thinking about when the next pack coming in.
Rob Boyd is Rick's longtime friend from the Detroit streets and was also heavily involved in the drug and crime scene of that time, even being featured on the Reels TV show called Gangsters, America's Most Evil.
I tell people all the time, the game never changed, man, just the players in the game.
Rob is also a dropout, but he turned his life around, now working through his nonprofit called The Streets Don't Love You Back, an intervention project which, among other endeavors, helps kids stay in school and off the streets.
It's very important what neighborhood, what school you go to, because if you're in a gang-infested neighborhood and drug neighborhood, you ain't gonna be concentrating on no school. You're gonna be concentrating on survival. So we wanna get kids away from that and have them just being comfortable and safe and getting a great education.
Rick Wershey, Rob Boyd, and Sheriff Mark Lamb are all believers in school choice programs as a means to get high-risk kids into any type of school, including private and charter schools. Any school that is capable of sparking interest in education and keeping kids safely off the streets and out of trouble.
So I'm a freedom guy. And so with that, I believe that parents should be entrusted with the decision for their own children. I think that what we've done is by forcing kids into a certain school, I think it lowers the level of education that you get because it's not competitive.
Is school choice a potential game changer for lower income, inner city, and minority children who need more educational options than just the neighborhood public school, where so many kids end up dropping out? Rick Wershey says absolutely.
There are opportunities that I really didn't have as a kid. My last grade completed was the 8th grade when I was home. So when I went to prison, I received a GED.
Well, there's data that has come out that shows that kids who don't graduate high school are much more likely to end up incarcerated.
It all falls into line with the same thing. And when I was in prison, I spent a lot of time in prison, and a lot of the kids couldn't read or write, and now they're grown men that couldn't read or write. And one day you're going to release them back into society and they're not going to be able to read or write. So what do? They're probably going to commit another crime to try and survive.
An ugly cycle of lost opportunities and lost freedom, which, if we're taking an honest look at the situation, did in fact start all the way back here for many and culminated here.
So now what's next for you?
Right now, it's just my GD. I'll focus on that, tough. I got all my book work in there, my homework, and that's what I'm focused on right now. Because I'm probably going to go back to prison. I don't like saying that, but it is what it is,
Jeremy's grandparents keep believing in their grandson, telling us he's an expressive writer and sharing with us an emotional letter that Jeremy wrote from behind bars when his brother was shot and killed 2 years ago.
My brother Joshua Duran was the best brother I could have. Every day since he passed, I look at the sky and hope to see him just one more time.
As he awaits his outcome, Jeremy finishes our interview with a cautionary message on the importance of getting an education.
They're going to have regrets if they don't stick in school. So I suggest that they just stay, because if they stay in school, they ain't going to have these conversations like I'm having with you right now.
In the streets, they be watching, plotting to get you murked. Keep your eyes